I call the 2020 Amherst School District Deliberative Session to order. If you all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, I'd like to ask Anna Perrell to lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Welcome all. My name is Nate Jensen, and I'm the moderator of the Amherst School District. Welcome to the deliberative session for the Amherst School District of 2020. Welcome also to those watching on cable TV, as well as, I believe, Facebook and YouTube later this evening, live or on one of the many replays that will be shown on Comcast Channel 20 or 21 between Friday and Election Day, which is March 10th. Can you hear me? How's that? All right. Sorry. You have a copy of the warrant, which was provided to you as you came in, so I will dispense with reading it. This evening, we begin the deliberative session for the 2020 Amherst School District meeting, under which we will be governed by RSA 40:13, also known as Senate Bill 2. On Tuesday, March 10th, we shall vote by a paper ballot at the Sauhegan High School on the warrant as we agree to its wording this evening. Voting will be from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. on that day. So let's begin with introductions. I'd first like to introduce Beth Kuzba, who's the chair of the school board. So Beth, would you introduce your board, please?
Do I have to get up?
Yes, you do.
I would like to, is this on?
Just talk loudly into it.
Okay.
There you go.
There we go. I would like to introduce my board. We have Vice Chair Terry Beam, Tom Gothier, John Glover, and Ellen Grugin.
Thank you. And now I'd like to introduce Adam Steele, who is the superintendent. Adam, would you introduce your staff, please?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Our counsel this evening is Stephen Bennett from Wadley, Starr and Peters. Our business administrator is Michelle Croto. Assistant Superintendent Christine Landwirl. And in the audience, Principal of Clark Wilkins Elementary School, the Owls, Anna Perrell. And Principal of Amherst Middle School, the Eagles, Dr. Bethany Bernasconi. Assistant principals at Clark Wilkins are Kristen Morgenstern, thank you. There's no notes up here. And Kathleen Murphy, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to introduce Frank Brown, who is the chair of the Ways and Means Committee. And Frank, could you introduce the committee as well? Is the committee here?
Some of them are here. They're hiding.
Okay. That's wise, I think.
So first of all, Victoria Parisi is, remember, Victoria's back here. Christine Grayson is another member. Kelly Schmidt, I don't see Kelly.
She's over there.
There she is. And two members, Jack Beldegas and Jeff Candido, were not able to make it this evening.
Okay, thank you. And then I'd also like to recognize a couple of faces that I saw. Steve Kaufman. Where's Steve? He said he's going to make fun. Oh, there you are. You said you were going to make fun of me from the stage, close to the stage. So Steve is the town moderator. I also saw Dwight Brew and Peter Lyon and John D'Angelo. Is any other the selectmen here? Oh, and Reed. Sorry, you were sitting on the stairs. I didn't see you. All right. Well, thank you. And any other dignitaries here? Is George Bauer here, the other moderator? Yeah, there he is. Yep. Okay, very good. All right. I also want to thank Stan St. Ange and Bruce Chakrin for their assistance in setting up this event tonight, and also the students and folks that are videotaping this for us. So I'd like to move on to business. Our work tonight is to decide the wording of the articles on which all registered voters will have an opportunity to vote on March 10th from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. in the election at Sauhegan High School. Voters at tonight's deliberative session under SB 2 rules are empowered to discuss, deliberate, and debate each warrant article, and to take one of two courses of action on each warrant article. The first course is to maintain the original wording of the article as prepared by the school board, in which case that original warrant article wording will be placed on the official ballot. The other option is to amend the original wording of the warrant article. If an amendment is approved, the amended warrant article is placed on the official ballot. And note, it only requires a simple majority to amend. But there are, I'm sure, legal implications for each amendment that comes up, which we'll discuss with Mr. Bennett. Voters will also be voting to elect 2 school board members and other important school positions on the official ballot. But the warrant article concerning candidates cannot be altered at this meeting. During the past many years, Amherst School District moderators have always suggested a small number of meeting rules to facilitate the orderly management of our meeting. I would again like to ask your support for the following, by which I hope you will agree makes sense for how we govern ourselves this evening. You'll find these rules in the handout. It's not on the back page. It's somewhere in one of the last pages in the handout. They're up on the screen here. So these rules in brief are that I will not follow Robert's rules, and I'll use the following general rules of procedure to keep things moving and not get bogged down in procedural quagmires. Non-voters will be permitted in the auditorium only if the room permits after the meeting has begun. The moderator will I will take articles in the order they appear on the warrant unless I announce that we'll take them out of order. There should be no reason for that tonight. Motions to amend must be made in writing and will be voted separately. Amendments will not be allowed to accumulate. Each speaker shall state your name and limit your time at the microphone to 3 minutes. No individual will be allowed to speak a second time until all the others wishing to speak for the first time have done so. We have 2 microphones up here. You can speak at either one. We usually have them as labeled for and against, but we really aren't going to stand by that. But if we do get it to the point where we need to, I can always split it up into for and against. I'll only accept the motion that is made at a microphone. There'll be no motion to call the question will be accepted until there has been sufficient debate on the article. A motion to restrict reconsideration in accordance with RSA 40, Section 10 should be made immediately following the announcement of the vote on that article. And finally, I will dispense with reading the warrant at this time. However, I will read each warrant article when it's moved to the floor for deliberation and action. The warrant is also printed in the voter's guide. The annual report and voter's guide to the official ballot will be sent to all residents prior to the election. If you are all supportive of these guidelines, please indicate by waving your hand in the air. Does anyone not support these guidelines? All right, so I see that we have accepted the guidelines for the evening. And just one housekeeping note on the rules. At the completion of voting for each warrant article, I will accept a motion to restrict reconsideration of the wording of that article. This is for your protection. When you restrict reconsideration, should someone request reconsideration at a later hour in the meeting of an article whose wording was previously approved, it cannot be voted on again until the voters of Amherst School District have been warned. We then have to meet 7 days later to reconsider the article. So are there any questions before we proceed? Seeing none, let's begin. So first, we will go to warrant article 11, the election of officers. Give me a second to call that up. Where's the, there it is. So I will briefly read that. So Article 11, election of officers, voting by official ballot March 10th, 2020. To the following school district offices. A, to choose 2 school board members for the ensuing 3 years. B, to choose 1 school district moderator for the ensuing 3 years. C, to choose 1 school district clerk for the ensuing 3 years. And D, to choose 1 school district treasurer for the ensuing 3 years. As I said before, that warrant article cannot be changed in this meeting, so we'll move on to warrant article 12, which is the operating budget. So I'll begin by reading the warrant article, which is Article 12 in your handout. Shall the Amherst School District raise and appropriate as an operating budget, not including appropriations by special warrant articles and other appropriations voted separately, the amounts set forth on the budget posted with the warrant or as amended by vote of the first session for for the purposes set forth therein, totaling $28,986,317. Should this article be defeated, the default budget shall be $28,645,517, which is the same as last year, with certain adjustments required by previous action of the Amherst School District or by law, or the governing body may hold one special meeting in accordance with RSA 40:13, Roman numeral 10 and Roman numeral 16, to take up the issue of a revised operating budget only. A majority vote is required. This is recommended by the Amherst School Board 5-0 and recommended by the Amherst School District Ways and Means Committee 6-0. The estimated tax impact of passing this article is 9 cents per thousand. The estimated tax impact of not passing this article is negative 11 cents per thousand. So, Beth, would you, I'm sorry? Oh, so to begin with, I'd like to ask Adam Steele to give a State of the Schools presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, and good evening. I'm very, very proud to be your school superintendent. We have tremendous schools filled with absolutely professional, highly trained educators who care for our students, protect them, care for them, and guide them, filled with wonderful students who are respectful and kind, eager to learn, and in facilities that, although need some work in the future, are well maintained and are treated very well by our custodial staff. So I'm very proud to stand here this evening and tell you a little bit more about how our schools are doing. In the national context, we hear a lot about how our schools are failing. United States schools are lagging behind other countries, and we are not keeping up with what other world economies are doing when it comes to school. This was an article from the Wall Street Journal just a few months ago detailing the PISA results, which is the largest worldwide test given to 15-year-olds that measure performance in reading and math, and science as well. Yet our 15-year-olds, who all matriculated from mostly from the Amherst schools, some from Mount Vernon, did extremely well on the PISA exam. In reading, we scored a 535 as our average score. The highest scoring country scored a 535, which was Singapore. Extremely good results. In math, we scored a 544, which would put us just behind Singapore and Hong Kong. And in science, we scored a 562, which far and away would have beaten every other country. How do we do locally against the school districts we compare ourselves to? Well, we spent some time with the data using the top school districts in New Hampshire and put together this chart that shows how we did in math last year. On this chart, Amherst is in black on the left of each set of bar charts, and each grade level going across shows how we fared compared to the other top performing school districts in the state. And you can see we're right in the mix in every single grade level in math. In reading, similar situation. Our scores compared to the best school districts in the state of New Hampshire and our neighboring school districts, we do very, very well compared to our peers. And then in science, we only test students in grades 5 and 8, and you can see in grade 8, we far and away pace the state. Where are our students heading after they leave the Amherst School District? They're heading to Sauhegan High School, where compared to the national average, we have 68% of our students reach college completion within 6 years of graduation. The average nationwide for low minority, high income school districts is 51%. So we do extremely well when it comes to college, both retention and completion within 6 years. We have a very outstanding school system. But yet we know we're just on the forefront of where we need to go as a school system. And in short, where that path is heading us is a personalized learning pathway for every student. We know that we need to treat students not as a big body and a big group of students, but instead as the individual. What are the specific things that are preventing individual students from accessing the curriculum? What are the specific supports we need to provide for those students? And what are the specific goals we need to have for individual students? We know that the world has changed and that our schools need to change in lockstep. If you were here last night, you heard me talk about what schools used to look like. It was something like this. And yet there are many people in society who still think schools look this way today, or if not, that they ought to, because it worked well enough many, many decades ago. And back in this day, we taught math like this. where arithmetic and learning the algorithms of math were the focus. Things that didn't require higher order thinking skills to solve problems, but instead memorization of pathways to solve the same problem over and over again. The reason for that was there were no computers or calculators to solve these problems, and most of the jobs of the day looked something like this. So it's no wonder classrooms look that way. But the World Economic Forum says the type of jobs and skills that our students are expected to have are things like creativity and problem solving, collaboration and communication, because the services industry drives our economy. The ability to work with people and to solve novel problems, apply new skill sets to things that haven't even been invented yet, is key. None of us, when we went to school, thought, you know what, I might work in social media one day. Why was that? It didn't exist back then. And yet we're producing students that are going to graduate our school system enter a workforce where some demographers expect them to have to change not only jobs but careers as many as 3 to 5 times during their working life. In order to be successful at doing that, they're going to need to have problem-solving skills, communication skills, and collaboration skills that will always allow them to be on the forefront looking for new jobs and new industries to compete against. So now we teach math something like this. This is a 2nd or 3rd grade math problem. And you can see there's still a need for arithmetic and computation, but these are higher order thinking skills that we're teaching our students at the early grade levels because we know they're going to need those types of problem solving. And we know that because many jobs of today look much more like this than the factory line model that we saw before. So we know why we need to change, but specifically how are we going to change our school system over the next several years to be the type of place that provides a personalized pathway for every student. The first step is something called mastery learning. Mastery learning in a nutshell is the premise that students should be able to demonstrate what they've learned, period. In other words, grades should reflect what a student knows and what they can demonstrate knowing, not how hard they've worked or how many times they showed up for class. It's a pretty simple concept, but really it upends the entire system of schools that many of us participated in when we went to school. In short, in order to achieve a certain score in a class or in a grade, to earn a grade, the teacher lays out these are the things you have to demonstrate, the skills you have to possess, the knowledge you have to obtain, and if you do that, you can earn the grade that you want. But it's key to our success at moving forward. This is the enabling step in allowing us to move students through our school system as individuals and not as groups. Many students are entering our school system not having the same level of supports from home that students a generation ago had. And we know that the social and emotional support needed for many of our students exceeds that of kids entering our school system even 5 years ago. And so something we know our students need is a relationship with an anchoring adult, someone they can connect with and will be in their lives longer than a 1-year time frame, longer than the typical grade level that we associate with school. We need a challenge for every student. Every student deserves to be challenged. The data in our school system shows that when we measure growth, which is how far individual students go from 1 year to the next, that our lower achieving students are growing the most. They're growing the fastest and doing the best in our school system. However, students on the other end of the spectrum, our most academically advanced students, aren't growing as much as students at the lower end. And we know that every student deserves that challenge. And then finally, we need to address what is becoming a major blockage for our students when they leave our school system, the cost of college and the affordable options that are available for students after they leave our school system. And so we're looking at partnering with local universities to find ways to upend the model and change the system for our future students. So in short, we have a tremendous school system, but we feel like we're just starting to hit our stride. Again, we have a school system where the value is in the classroom, that individual teachers we have making connections with individual students, and the community support and engagement that we have. So I thank you very much for the opportunity to be your superintendent, and I'll turn it back over to Beth Kuzma. Or Tom Gauthier.
Tom Gauthier.
Thank you.
That's actually my job. I'm turning it over to Tom Gauthier. There you go. So Tom, you're going to present on the budget, correct?
Yes, if I'm good to go.
Yes, please.
Okay, perfect. Don't want to break any rules in terms of introductions. All right, so as Adam mentioned, we had the warrant article. Do we need to read this again, Mr. Moderator?
No, go ahead.
Okay, perfect. So let's go one more time. This is our proposed budget for this year. As we set out to make this budget, and first off, I do want to thank everybody for being here tonight. At least it's a nice February night, not snowy and lousy outside. And certainly want to thank everybody that's watching at home for what is certainly an important part of the process to get us to Election Day on March 10th. So as I started to say, we had 3 goals for working on the budget this year, and really it's 2 goals. The second goal was a Part A and a Part B. The first one was to reduce class sizes, to pass a budget that allowed us to continue to reduce class sizes. And then the second part that really has 2 parts, it was to fund a study to determine the long-term path for our actual schools, and then it was also a funding of a capital reserve fund to actually put money into a fund that we don't currently have to be able to take care of the schools as they currently are situated. And so that's something that we'll talk about in just a little bit, the importance of that and also the importance of the facilities part of it. To recap, we are working on a default budget for the FY20 school year that we're in right now. That's because everything failed on the ballot last year in March. So we're proposing a budget, as you can see there, of $28,986,000 and change, which will represent about an increase of 1.3%, or about $367,000 over the current budget that we're operating on right now. As we look at how this is broken down by funds, the one fund that you want to keep an eye on is the general fund. This is the one that's actually, to use the word repetitively, funded by the taxes that we pay. So if you look at the general fund, it's about a $220,000 increase out of that 366, which equates to less than 1% on the overall increase from the general fund we're working on right now. The food service budget, that is the one that has a much bigger increase percentage-wise. It's not as much dollars-wise, but when you look at the overall budget, it's almost 40% more than what we're operating on right now. And the big reason for that, there are 2 things that go into that. One of them is the way that the food services director is funded. We'll get to that in just a minute. And then the other part of this, why this fund isn't as critical to look at when you're looking at the taxpayer part of it, it's simply because this is self-funded. It's based off the revenues that are brought in by Hot Lunch and other programs like that. As of day 73, which was earlier in the month of January, just to give you a point of reference, the revenues in all 3 schools were up by about 10 to 16% year over year in terms of the money brought in by the school lunch programs. So that is certainly trending in the right direction and certainly setting us up to be self-funded, which is what that fund has to be. So as we go into the proposed budget, the $28,600,000 and change that we talked about, there are some specific categories where you'll notice increases and decreases, and they're all broken down on this slide right here. Salaries and benefits makes up our biggest increase, but there's also a big decrease in special services, and if you do the math, those 2 wind up really offsetting each other by just a $10,000 or $20,000 margin. A couple of notes under salaries and benefits. About half of that increase is contractual due to the agreement that we have with the Amherst Teachers Union, which is in year 3 of a 4-year agreement. We did have a max increase of 2.8% in their health insurance coverage, which is actually a big savings over what the max increase ended up being for the budget that we're currently in. The other large portion of that category is 4 additional positions under the staffing. We'll talk about those in a minute, expanding on what those 4 new positions are. We mentioned the big decrease for special services. It's primarily due to special kids that are in the special programs leaving Amherst and matriculating into Sauhegan. Amherst, of course, still has to pay for part of those services, but it's something that is going to be shared by the entire SAU. So you'll see some of that reflection in the SAU budget when we get to that down there below. Under food service, the $62,000 under the SAU budget, that is the food services director, the way that it's being accounted for this year. And then the SAU budget is hitting the general fund by about $100,000, and that's primarily staffing that is in the IT department. There's a new data coordinator position and a network administrator position, and in years past, that was all paid for by the Sauhegan budget. But last fall in October, the SAU board, which is a combination of the Sauhegan, Amherst, and Mount Vernon boards, we got together and decided that it made sense to put the IT and the network data administrator position in the SAU budget because all 3 school districts receive services by those positions. So for Sauhegan to pay for it and to only get roughly 1/3 of the services didn't make much sense. So that means all schools now benefit from the services, and all the schools in the district will end up paying for those services at the same time. So it's certainly a much more equitable thing for the SAU and then for the individual schools as well. You will also notice at the bottom there is a $150,000 amount for a facility study, but we'll expand on that a little bit more in a few moments as well. As we move to personnel, or I should say move back to personnel, I did want to highlight the 4 new positions that we talked about that make up a good portion of the proposed increase for salaries and benefits for teachers. One of our goals as a board, I mentioned it a few minutes ago, and it's certainly one of the administration's goals, is to reduce class sizes overall. We have some of the largest class sizes in the state, K through 8, maybe not so much kindergarten this year, but certainly first grade through 8th grade. In a lot of cases, we're top 10 in class sizes in the state in those grades. And you can certainly see that by the slide we had a few moments ago with all the red that was up there. On this slide, I should say, all the red that's up there, those are class sizes that are over our goals, some of them by upwards of 4 to 5 students higher than where we want to be. Now, studies have shown that large class sizes like this are detrimental to students. It makes it tougher for them to learn, and it's tough on teachers to be able to provide that one-on-one services or the services that individual students need. They can't possibly hit 25 students in one single class, and so all kids and certainly the teachers suffer through that as well. So right now in the budget, we're proposing 2 new 4th grade teachers, but those are only tentatively slated for 4th grade. Once we get enrollment figures firmed up by the end of the school year and beginning of the summertime, we'll actually know where those teachers are going to go and have more information on that at the time. But as of right now, they're slated for 4th grade. You can see 3rd grade this year has a very high student rate, and it's going to get bigger next year because they're losing a teacher 7 to 6. That's why we're going to increase that to 8 positions in 4th grade to break down some of those class sizes for what is a very large 3rd grade class. The other 2 positions that are part of the special services strategy, and this is something adopted by SAU 39 in the Amherst School District. A couple of years ago, Amherst decided to bring all of the special services back into the school buildings themselves, and it's certainly something that happened SAU-wide as well. It's got 2 big advantages for this. Number 1 is that students who require special services, they get to stay in town, they get to stay in their schools, they get to be around their friends, they're not traveling maybe a half an hour or an hour every day to get those services. And then there's a significant cost savings as number 2. Programs are expensive to run in-house, but over the course of the last 3 years, as Superintendent Steele mentioned, over $6 million in savings for what we would have paid in tuition and out-of-district transportation and out-of-district costs, $6 million in savings by bringing these programs in-house. So yes, it's a big line item, and it certainly affects cost per pupil numbers, but it's certainly something that provides a lot of benefits overall funding-wise, and then certainly for the kids as well. The other 2 new positions that we talked about are behavioral positions. One of them is a behavioral specialist, which will start with about a $20,000 net savings right away. That's one of those special services savings. And then the other one is an English as a second language professional, the ESOL professional. It's about a $97,000 cost. Amherst will only pay about 2/3 of that because a third of that will be shared by Sauhegan. So the Sauhegan students will get to benefit from that as well, and Amherst will certainly see a bit of a break on the bill for that one in the meantime. A couple of other items to note in the budget before we talk facilities. We do have 3 recess monitors being proposed at Wilkins School. We've talked with Principal Anna Perrell. They'll benefit from having additional eyes on the playgrounds for safety of the kids and then certainly to monitor behavior. So we're proposing those 3 recess monitors. They're going to be the same people that work every day during lunch and recess, 4.5 hours a day, covering inside and outside. We asked about using volunteers. We did our due diligence to see if there was another way to do this without putting something on the budget with more personnel. And there's really not that way to get a stable presence every day where the kids see the same people out there. They know what the rules are. The administrators, the professionals that will come in, they can set the rules for the kids. Everybody knows what's on the table, and then they'll get to set those expectations every day. The kids benefit from that, and certainly the people out there running recess. The more you drill those behavior patterns into the kids, maybe drill's not the right word for that, but the more you set the expectation.
Choose your words carefully.
Yes, exactly. The kids will know what they can and can't get away with, and it's certainly better for everybody as well. You'll also notice at the bottom, in the middle there, I should say, about $53,000 set aside for AMS. We'll replace some furniture in classrooms that's heavy, bulky, really out of date, and then we'll also replace the safety mats that are located underneath the basketball hoops in the gymnasium. So now I will get to the facilities. So this is the last item I'll touch upon, and it's a bit of a longer presentation because it's something that's important, one of our goals that we mentioned in the very beginning of my spiel here. So it's $150,000, and we're calling this a study for renovation or replacement. So it's a fancy name. We broke it down to 3 questions that we asked ourselves in our last meeting, actually, after the public hearing. First question was simply, what is this? So simply put, it's an architectural study to come in with an architectural firm. They're going to give us multiple plans and ideas for the renovation or replacement of one or all of our 3 buildings, Clark, Wilkins, and then Amherst Middle School. This will kick off a series of steps, which we'll outline in just a few minutes, that will allow us to come up with all the plans and all the potential ideas. Once all that happens, we get the plans, we look at it, and as a school board, we come up with, or we look at all the options and decide this is the best option for taxpayers, it's the best options for students, it's the best options for the town, and then we'll come forward and bring that forward as we go through this process. So the next question we asked is, why are we doing this? Why put $150,000 in the budget for something that might have been voted down a year ago? To be succinct, the buildings, they've been the neglected stepchild of this district, of this town, and it's gone on for decades and decades. Now, during the public hearing back in January, we presented this rather inarticulately as a study in determining the first step for determining what the future of our buildings is going to be. Well, after public feedback and after we talked about it and had some self-reflection in our meetings, it really wasn't articulated well. So the $150,000 is actually going to take us to step 2. So how did we get to step 2? What was step 1? And there are a couple of things that are up there. The capital needs assessment was step 1. That was conducted a couple of years ago. And this gave us a 20-year path towards what it's going to take to maintain the buildings and all the major systems inside them. So roofing, boilers, pavement, all of those things that go wrong in schools, that go wrong in your house that you need to replace over the course of generations in the house. Secondly, about 18 months ago, there was a joint facilities committee formed, administrators, school board members, and a lot of public members. They formed this committee and they took a good look at the schools, all 3 schools. They toured the schools and they studied the conditions of each building. They analyzed enrollment trends and then what our future predictions for enrollment were going to be. They studied how classroom and then special needs space had changed in laws and the requirements, but also how we're using those spaces in AMS and Wilkins and how we're able to adapt to those rules and requirements and just the needs that we have. And then they also studied the history of investment in the schools by taxpayers and voters. So what did the JFC find? First and foremost, something we all knew, but certainly was driven home by their findings, we have a severe lack of space, and it's especially so in Wilkins, and that impact is felt in a lot of areas. Primarily, most importantly, it's got a negative impact for our main goal of reducing class sizes, giving kids more of that one-on-one attention so you're not having 25 kids and 1 teacher. And we mentioned that slide a few minutes ago with all the red and green squares on it. A lot more red than green. We want to get to green, and that's one of our goals, but we can't do it with the space that we have currently. So to make room for the classrooms that we do have to get some green up there, we've had to, we've had to make room for classrooms and make sacrifices elsewhere. Last year, our music program in Wilkins School, that was on a cart, so he went around room to room for the kids every single day, a different grade. What happens when that happens is when your kid plays the drums upstairs in his bedroom and you're a parent and said, drums are a great idea for a kid. Makes a lot of noise and you don't like the noise and you want to throw the drums out. Same thing happens with the kids in the school. You're in 2nd grade, the 3rd graders are nearby, they're doing music class in their classroom. It's a huge distraction for kids who certainly don't need any more distractions throughout the course of the day. So this year, music has its own space because we have less teachers in the building, but this is our technology space, if you will. This is Miss Gail Polio's classroom, and it just happens to have wheels and a cart and something that she can push around from room to room. So technology in classrooms right now, but other specials have been in classrooms before. This here is the multi-purpose room. What you're looking at on this side of that big blue curtain is the cafeteria. On the other side of the multi-purpose room, that's the gymnasium. Not a huge issue every day, but there is 1 day a week right now where we have gym class going on with lunches. This has been part of the behavioral program they've installed, the Golden Spatula program, to get kids in the lunchroom to have quieter conversations, to be at their seats, to be sitting on their backsides, so that when there is a gym class going on, you're not competing with the noise there. When one group starts to compete against the other, we know what happens. But as we reduce class sizes, or as lunches get longer, something that happened this year, we extended lunches by about 5 minutes. The shared space becomes more of a common space, and you're going to have gym class at lunchtime a lot more frequently. And again, you create noise issues and distraction issues. I did find it interesting, and I'm not sure if you know this if you're new to town, but this multi-purpose room here and at Clark has been a problem since the school was created back in 1967. So much of a problem that when they built the school, there was no multi-purpose room or cafeteria. So they had the idea, let's bus kids to town hall for hot lunch. Obviously, that's not a great idea. So a year later, they built the auditorium. The kitchen didn't pass, so they had to stop hot lunch altogether because they had no way to make lunch for the kids in their brand new multi-purpose room. So this has been something that's been an issue for decades and continues to be a bit of a problem right now. There we go. This is an interventionist office. This is 4 interventionists sharing this space. These professionals work one-on-one with students. When you have 4 in an office, it makes it tough to work one-on-one. Again, noise distractions, or if you have a parent conference going on and an interventionist needs to bring a student in there, certainly privacy issues, distraction issues, space issues become a problem when you have 4 people sharing one office. In this slide, this is the Special Education Programming Office in Wilkins, one of the workplaces for special education programming. I counted 6 cubes in this one room. So special programs, they've had an impact at every school because we've brought them back in-house to run the programs, as we mentioned. You need space to be able to do that, but you need space to meet legal requirements as well. So it takes much more space than what we've seen 10, 20, certainly 30 years ago, and our buildings simply haven't grown and aren't able to adapt to get all the space things that you need to be able to meet other goals. There is a saying in life that we've all heard, there's a space for everything, and everything in its place. That is a copier in a hallway. Pretty sure that's not the way that saying was supposed to be used. And then in the picture on the left, that is a second grade classroom. Now keep in mind we have large class sizes and classrooms that are about appropriate size, but a lot of kids in them. Behind the plywood walls and behind the stack of binders there, that is a computer server taking up valuable classroom space, maybe for storage, maybe for something else. But they boxed it in, they put it out of the way, out of sight, out of mind, but certainly not something that should be in a classroom, certainly not something that should be in a classroom that has potentially too many kids in it. And of course, we go back to our favorite department. This is the technology department, Ms. Gail Polio's realm. This is their workplace, which you'll happen to notice is in the back of a library storage closet. So not exactly, they have a window, I guess, which is better than probably most people's office, but certainly not an ideal office space in the back of the library. Excuse me. Maybe the pride and joy of Amherst. We've talked a lot about these before, the portable buildings. So these are the only two that we have left. At one point, this district had 9 of these temporary solutions. 7 of them are gone. These are the last 2 standing. Now, these are expensive, and they're hard to acquire, I should say. We know this because at the start of the school year, a year and a half ago, we had a fire in one of the buildings. I believe it was the building on the left. Don't quote me on that, but one of them caught fire. Whatever building it was, that's an issue. Couldn't get a new one in because they're very expensive, and other towns have had to use these, and they're just impossible to get in. They're also detached from the main building, so security features that the building has are not extended to this because you have a separate entrance, outside space, and certainly not the locking mechanisms that you have in the main school. You'll see in that picture on the left, in the bottom left, storage space is limited inside the buildings. They're not very big buildings. You have 2 classrooms in each one. So when you have the storage space, and then you have an incident like we had last year, after that fire, we had a smoke incident, an electrical issue. No serious damage done, but enough smoke damage done where they couldn't have hooks on the walls to hang jackets, so they brought in these bins and they put them on the floor, and that is where kids in the wintertime get to store their backpacks, jackets, and other things that they need to go from building to building while they go outside. You just can't certainly go outside, and it's not a covered tunnel like you have from hotel to hotel in cities. And then inside the portable, maybe the most efficient room in all of Amherst, my favorite picture that we had from our capital needs assessment. Certainly get everything that you need in it. There is a restroom in there. There's also a desk, a workspace. There is a printing suite. That is what the black thing on top of the desk is. There's a hand washing station. Maybe if you get something in your eyes, it's an eye washing station. There are cleaning supplies down below. And then that white box on the ground, that is a personal hot water heater for that sink. So it has pretty much everything that you need. If you put a bed in there, you'd have a nice 1-bedroom suite that you could probably rent out in the town of Amherst. So those are only Wilkins photos. That's one school. We could be here all night if we did this. I will highlight a couple of things at Amherst Middle School. Consistent temperatures. We hear this a lot. It's freezing in one room. Kids wear jackets. We see this at the high school occasionally too. In the next room, kids are sweating. They're wearing shorts. You have some kids that wear shorts every day because their classrooms are hot every day. That's an issue. AMS has, in this classroom, you can see it on the left-hand side of that wall, kind of in the center of the screen. Those are movable walls. They go back and forth, or at least they're supposed to. Many of those walls that are dividable or barriers. They're movable partitions. They create irregular shaped classrooms, but they also are broken. So you can't fully shut them, you can't fully open them, which means that one class is in one room, one class is in the next, a broken wall between, and again, you're creating noise and distraction problems between the two. However, heating problems could be solved. Get a fan and you can move heat from one room to the other. But that's a solution for facilities. And of course, all of this is to say that we're still running 2 elementary schools, one for kindergarten, one for 1st through 4th grade. That means 2 elementary staffs. It means one administration is covering all this, going back and forth. Even if it's only a half a mile, they still have to take time out of their day to travel. We have 1 kitchen staff doing this. We have temporary lunchroom setups in Clark Wilkins School. Certainly not an ideal situation. The last thing that the Joint Facilities Committee told us is, what has the investment been like in this town? I will admit that this chart is not complete. It's very hard to get records of every single thing that's been voted on, passed or failed, but this is about 90% of what's been voted on in the last 30 to 40 years, probably close to 50 years now. During that time, we've had about $500,000 put into Wilkins School, just over $1 million put into Clark. If you look at the money that you put into your own house compared to the value, probably much higher percentages than what $500,000 goes to into the value of Wilkins. There has been about $35 million voted down in a variety of projects at all of these schools, everything from an upper elementary school to a bigger AMS expansion than the one that they did a few years ago, to more routine things like sprinkler systems, HVAC, and roofing. Those are all things that have failed as part of that $35 million. Now, just as critically to this, things that have passed in the past but have not been put on the ballot by the school board in the last couple of years, we have all of $22,000 in a reserve fund. So that means if one of these projects that was turned down, say a heating system, if that system fails, where do we get that money to fix it? Probably going to be more than $22,000 to fix that, so where do we get that? I mean, something else gets cut out of the budget. We have a whole slew of things coming up in the next 20 years, averaging about roughly $800,000 to $1 million in projects between Clark, Wilkins, and AMS. And this fund right here has $22,000 in it. Beth will talk more about that in a few minutes in the Warnock article that is sort of part 2 of our second goal. But that's a big issue, $22,000. A lot of people have more than that just to save up for problems in their house. For a school that's this big, this much square footage, certainly not adequate and certainly not well thought out. So I will take you to our last question that we had, and that's, what do we get out of this facility study? So this chart, while not complete and not specific to the dollar, this was provided by an architectural firm, and it gives us a good idea as to what $150,000, or in this case about $180,000, can get us. You may think, what does $150,000 get us in a multi-million-dollar school project? Well, this kind of lays it out. So step 1, roughly $24,000. It's a facility study of each school, drafting of existing plans. It's an on-site review. They'll meet with facility staff, and then they'll review all the important systems that we have in the school, following up on that capital needs assessment, giving a more up-to-date picture at the moment. Step 2, about $17,000. Programming and vision. This is where the architects will start talking to teachers, administrators, what our space needs are, what we're currently doing to solve them, what the ideal situation is, and then certainly what we're missing in ideal configurations that go with that. For step 3, district-wide master planning. So combining all of those plans, all the results of those surveys, we'll work with a civil engineer, and there will be a review of all the potential sites along with conceptual designs, for various grade configurations, and then multiple solutions will be all pieced together into a document to start creating that master plan. Steps 4 and 5, they don't have cost with them, but steps 4, we start working with a civil engineer, a wetland scientist, and a geotechnical engineer. We start digging test pits. We start doing borings of all the different places where we could either renovate a school or where we could put a potentially new school in all those expansion areas. Step 5, we start to get to conceptual design. Includes turning diagrams into floor plans and then exterior envelopes. It starts to map out all the systems, how they would work, and then coming up with all the needs to get pricing from an actual construction manager. And then the final step there, the marketing and rollout. This is all the stuff that we need to bring to the public. So once we have a plan in place, they'll help us with $12,000, give or take, to develop marketing materials, 3D images, floor plans, basically assisting in all the things that we need to start getting it out there in the public and start getting votes and getting interest in this project and explaining why this project is needed and what we're actually going to be doing. So again, those numbers are really just estimates, but it's pretty good estimates. As if the budget passes, we're able to work with the JFC and we'll get a roadmap for what to expect. We'll be able to get together with engineers, get bids, and start to lay out what we can do with $150,000. I mentioned that steps 1 through 6, roughly $180,000, certainly more than the $150 that's in the budget, but this certainly gets us an idea as to where we can go and gets us pretty far down that road to what a new building or what a potential renovation could eventually look like. And I know I just said new building, which is sort of a taboo phrase. This is not a guarantee that we get a new building. It's certainly just something that we want to look at. It's one of the many options. It's a renovation or replacement study. This gives us direction. It's something that we mentioned from back in the days when they built Clark and they didn't have an auditorium and they stopped serving hot lunch because they didn't have a kitchen. This is something that we've been lacking in this district for decades and decades and decades, but particularly it's come to head over the last 10, 15 years. And certainly hope that you look at this stuff and you look at best presentation next and you look at this and realize how important it is to have buildings that will actually match the investment that we've put into the teachers, students, and then the curriculum that we have here in the Amherst School District. So with that, I will turn it over to Beth.
So Beth, you're going to talk to the default budget, correct? Yeah, thank you.
I'm not talking about our the other portion of the facilities, our capital needs yet. I get to talk about the oh-so-fun default budget. Boring compared to what he just talked about. Sorry. The default budget calculation is a legally defined calculation that is identified in RSA 40.13.9b. The calculation takes last year's approved budget as a starting point. From there, it removes any one-time expenditures, takes all contractual obligations into consideration, such as staff and teachers' contracts, and any increase or decrease to debt services. There is a $50,000 reduction from a one-time expenditure as the special ed warrant article, which was on the ballot last year, as well as a reduction of $6,300 in debt services. As Tom already mentioned, we have a significant decrease in special education with students moving back in district from out-of-district placement and others moving to Sauhegan. This allows us to save money in special ed transportation and out-of-district costs. This year, we are in year 3 of the collective bargaining agreements with our teachers and support staff, with an increase associated with the agreement is $148,131. There is an additional $85,312 increase in the school nutrition budget this year. The reason for this is that we have more of our food services staff electing to take health insurance than we've budgeted for last year. In the everything else bucket is an added $173,258. Of that, $114,000 of it is us moving a special ed administrator position that was at the SAU building into Amherst. Another $60,000 is budgeted to help support the food services program. I also feel the need to highlight that within the everything else bucket, there's also been a decrease in liability insurance. All of these together give us an increase of $25,648 over this year's current budget. That is a 0.1% increase, and this makes the total default budget calculation $28,645,517. To reiterate, if this budget passes, it will have a 9-cent impact on the tax rate, which works out to be about $32 a year on the average home.
Okay, thank you. Frank, would you like to give the report of the Ways and Means Committee?
I would be somewhat repetitive to a lot of Tom's presentation, but let me emphasize a couple of things. First, I'd like to say that the board recognized that they were very cognizant of the vote last year and tried to come forward with a very conservative budget, which I think they did. And we worked very closely with them in reviewing all aspects of it, and we're very satisfied with the cooperation. One of the things that the Ways and Means did, and you saw it up there, was try and insist that which is part of the way we believe it was supposed to be done, was that the school nutrition budget be a standalone budget, where previously the director's cost was in the SAU budget and wasn't called out in the Amherst school budget. So the Ways and Means is responsible for that big increase that you saw in the nutrition budget, as the director's salary was moved into the Amherst budget and out of the SAU budget. I would point out just on the last issue about facilities and the need for the study. What wasn't mentioned by Tom was it will take about 4 to 5 years before you would actually open a building. And so, having been around the district now, and 2 or 3 years ago, worked on consolidation studies, and then all of a sudden the enrollment turned, and we start seeing significant increases in classes size at the kindergarten and in Clark. The need for us as a district understanding where we want to go and how we might go there, we believe is very critical, and that was the unanimous view of the board, so I want to emphasize that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. So I'd like to open the floor for discussion. If anyone would like to make a comment or ask a question, please move to the microphones. Go ahead.
Margaret McCabe, 9 Brigham's Way. I just wanted to comment on the class, the teachers, the chart that you showed with the numbers. And I looked at it, and there was a comment about Steve Frady's report. I think it would have been helpful if we could have seen that report so that we knew the details of the analysis of the class sizes. I have a question related to the kindergarten. As of October, was 97, and it's showing 142, I think, in the plan. So my question is, where are all these extra students? Do we know they're in the pipeline, and how did you come up with those estimates?
Go ahead.
Thank you. When it comes to kindergarten, we have almost no idea how many students will show up. Every year we make a projection, and it's sometimes off a lot, sometimes off a little. All I can tell you is that this year we have 25 more students registered as of today for next year than we had last year at this time.
Can I do a follow-up, or should I wait?
Yeah, why don't you wait, please? Next. You guys are too polite. Jump to the microphone.
We're going to sit here and argue about this.
right.
Bob Grumbeck, 6 Fair Oaks Drive, Amherst, obviously Amherst. A question for the board on the operating/default budget. In the operating budget, you show special services decreasing by $830,000. But then when we get to the default, it is really about a $400,000 difference. Can you explain where the other 800 or other 400 went to?
Hold on, I'm bringing up both of those on my thing.
Jen?
Michelle, just, there's kind of ups and downs with how things fall in different buckets, depending on, things that are in default but aren't, or that are in default, or in the proposed but not in the default, and things like that. I think it's actually better if Michelle explains how she categorized or categorized those specific categories
Michelle?
within those tables.
Yes, thank you. I'm happy to
Could
respond
you
to that.
speak closer to the microphone?
All right.
Thank you.
Is that better?
Yes.
Okay. The groupings are a little bit different in both cases, and you're comparing from the in one calculation, it's showing what the current year budget is compared to what's required for the default budget. And the way the salaries and benefits are grouped are different in the default calculation versus the other calculation.
May I just clarify my question?
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah.
I'm specifically asking, though, about special services. In the proposed operating budget, it shows a negative $830,000. Am I correct in understanding that that is special education? It's a different terminology than below.
Are you looking at the,
I'm looking at your sheets right here, proposed operating budget. Maybe we can bring it up on the slide?
Roughly slide 25 in the mission packet.
yeah.
Can you call it up on the screen, please?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm going to try to do it without making everybody dizzy. But I don't think that's going to happen.
So again, some of the items, if you look at special services, it says excluding wages and benefits, so that's primarily tuition-related items. So wages and benefits, the change is on the operating budget first line where it says salaries and benefits, it would have a change.
That would
in-
only increase then the differential, excluding. In other words, is special services the same as special education? As it's listed down below in the default budget.
Yes, there are some other items in special services in addition to straight special education.
Then
And-
let me try to ask it a different way. In the default budget, what was not taken back out of special services from above? Normally, when we talk default budget, special education is its own bucket. If it goes up by 100,000 or down by 100,000, that's what it is. We should be able to balance that off when we finally have a year that it's going down in Amherst, not Amherst School District, that we should see it down below in the default budget. But I'm not seeing that. That's my question.
I guess I can't respond to your question directly off the top of my head. I can certainly take a look at that and provide a follow-up to identify the variances between those two. I believe it's just the categorization of where the accounts are falling, but I understand your question.
All right, so we'll have to table that until you can get a response to him.
Yeah.
Okay. Can I,
Let's have another comment, and then you can come back up. Next.
Hi, Shannon Gascoigne, Amherst. So regarding the facilities piece, thank you, Tom, for all of that information. Clark School was built in 1937 to address overcrowding. Wilkins was built in 1967, and then in 1968, additional funds were put on the ballot because they were already overcrowded. I could keep going on, but my point is this is not this is a place we've been before as a community. We've had higher enrollments. If you look at the DOE's website, we've certainly had higher enrollments than we have today. What it's really important, I think, to note is that we weathered those storms with a number of portables. Between 2002 and 2006, across the district, we had 9 portable buildings. That was 18 classrooms. We don't currently have that. We have 2 portables, which is 4 classrooms, and in the last 2 years, we've had 1 portable out of commission because of a fire. The following year, there was a smoke incident, and children were evacuated. The bathroom in the portable, while it makes an entertaining photo, it's not really a laughing matter when that's where we're educating our children. So I'm pleased that the board has chosen to put the $150,000 into the budget. I fully support it. I hope the rest of the residents will as well, so that we can once again figure out how we're going to get to the place we need to be with our facilities. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shannon.
Other comments? Maggie, would you like to address again? Thank you.
Margaret McCabe, 9 Brigham's Way. I just want to follow up on the class size issue. I read in the the handout, when you're talking about the goal for fourth grade is 19.3, but when you look at the spreading of the classes, some of the younger classes even have more than that. So my question is, what is the goal? I mean, when you look at the goal, it seems like you want the lower numbers in the lower grades, like 15 or 16 in kindergarten, first grade, and second, and then to go higher as they go up. So my question is, why are we targeting fourth grade, or is this just a number in the budget, then it'll be decided when you actually hire people?
Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you. So, great question. It's really because of your first question, actually. We don't know what kindergarten will be. And so that's why when Mr. Gothier made the point that we would make final determinations over the summer, it's because we're going to look at what class sizes we have, specifically in kindergarten and fourth grade. If I had my druthers, I would have 4 new teaching positions in this proposed budget to make sure we had the right teachers both in kindergarten and fourth grade, but we, as stated earlier, are trying to be as conservative as possible.
Good.
Sorry, Bob Grumbeck, 6 Fair Oaks Drive. Again, on the special education, and I commend you on the savings you talk about a lot of the $6 million. I just want clarification. Is that strictly savings of money that we haven't spent going out of district, or is that the net that we have saved? I mean, are we calculating in the cost of the new teachers that we're hiring, the programs that we've been adding, the space that it's using, the space that it needs, and so on? What is the $6 million?
Good.
Thank you. Mr. Grumbeck, that is the net. We've not included things like utility costs for the classrooms we use in our school buildings, but it's a net of all personnel.
Okay. Other questions? Go ahead.
My final one. Bob Grumbeck, 6 Fair Oaks again.
You get that?
I sit near George, it's required.
I know.
Last year at this time, you talked as a board again that we do real well in Amherst addressing the kids. Adam, you had better terminology for it than I will, but that we're struggling, their growth rates have been great. On the other end, we have not been able to address those growth rates. What specifically has the board done in this budget to address that need?
Yeah. Go ahead.
I'll withdraw my question, Nate, if you want.
No, it's
that's
okay.
fine.
It's all right. It was just,
So I know you
Yeah,
asked
that's a
the
good
board
question.
specifically, but if I may,
yeah. Oh, Christine.
Go right ahead. Thank you.
So the number one thing that affects student achievement is the teacher in front of those students. We know that. The second leading indicator is the principal of the school building. But when it comes to the teacher in the classroom, besides their professional training, the second most important thing is the class size. And we've had some of the highest class sizes in the state of New Hampshire, especially compared to the peer districts that we compare ourselves to. And so to put it bluntly but fairly, when there's a very large class size and a teacher has to make a distinction between those that are far ahead and those that are far behind, it's a pretty simple choice for most of our teachers.
Thank you for your honesty.
All right. Are there any other comments on this warrant article? Ms. McCabe?
It's on a different topic,
I
though.
beg your pardon?
It's on a different topic.
Well, then let's talk about that.
No, it's not, it's on this.
It's
but
germane to this? Okay,
It's
that's fine.
germane to this, okay. So one of the things that I noticed in the slide presentation is that you're changing things to share costs so that they're spread over the districts evenly, like you're sharing personnel and those costs are being borne in the districts. My question is, and it may not be something you can do this year, but it's something that I want you to think about for other years. My question is, why are you not billing Sauhegan for the lease of the AMS land that Sauhegan sits on? By not charging Sauhegan, the Amherst taxpayers are subsidizing Mount Vernon residents by reducing Sauhegan expenses. These expenses would be borne proportionally by Mount Vernon residents instead of just Amherst residents, and the districts would be properly charged for all of their expenses, which goes in line to what you were trying to do with some of the education expenses.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McCabe. I wasn't here in '92 when the school was built, and I won't tell you what grade I was in at the time. But I can tell you that from my understanding, and Mr. Coughlin is here, who is much older and was way more involved than I was.
Are you going to take that standing down?
My understanding is that the land was leased to the Sauhegan Cooperative School District for something, a nominal fee like $1 for an extended period of time. I don't know if it was the full 99-year limit for traditional land leases or not, but I believe that to be the case, but I'd be happy to be corrected by someone more qualified and older.
And you said you weren't going to talk at this meeting. Mr. Coughlin.
To quote your answer from last night, yes.
Does that mean it's a 99-year lease, Mr. Coughlin?
I believe it's 99 years and it's a lot. So we have to renegotiate the contract.
Okay.
And
Go ahead.
60-something.
Chris Roden, 2 Jones Road. Do we have studies that show what the impact will be on the kids if we remain at the schools at the classroom sizes that we're at right now? I fully endorse more teachers so we can get the kids in a smaller classroom size. I just want to know what the impact will be, because I would imagine it would be drastic if we keep at the same class sizes.
Thank you. Okay.
I rely on the Tennessee STAR study of several years ago, where they did a longitudinal study on class size for several cohorts of students over time, and they validated that there is an academic achievement penalty when class size exceeds certain targets, and it's most important up through grade 3. It's still important after that, but most important below grade 3. And so as a follow-up to a prior question, what we're doing to address our high-end learners and really everything is this facility study that's included in the operating budget is our number one most important need, because that will address those issues, all of those issues. And so the good news is that we truly have remarkable teachers that are doing the best they can. I'm in classrooms, not as much as I'd like to be, but often. And I wish other folks had the perspective I get to have in seeing the difference that having another 3 or 4 students makes on a classroom, just in terms of the space, the time that the adults have for the children, and what it does to the overall feel of a classroom, just with what seems like a nominal increase in students, but 3 or 4 makes a big difference. So I don't want to paint a picture that we're going to have dire results as a result of our class sizes being some of the largest in the state, because we have some of the best teachers in the state. But it will have an impact. We want to have, the expectation is clear that we want to be one of the top 3 or 4 or 5 achieving school districts in the state, and that's one of our most critical needs to get there.
Steve, could you go and ask the band practice to cease? They're coming in. I want you to be the bad guy. Go.
I'm happy to abdicate my responsibilities to you and deputize you, Mr. Coughlin.
Just go to ask them to tone it down a little bit, please. All right. Sorry. Are there any other comments, questions on this warrant article?
I will say you're setting me to shush the town band, not the school band.
Oh, even more. Go get them.
If I don't come back, I'm out back in a tuba.
Anyone want to take bets on whether he gets back here? All right, are there any other comments and questions on this warrant article? Seeing no one moving towards the, Bob, are you moving to the, no. Moving towards the microphones, I will instruct the clerk to place the warrant article on the ballot as currently worded and thus declared. That was my thing. So now we move on to warrant article 13. I beg your pardon. I'll entertain a motion to restrict reconsideration of the article.
we allowed to?
Moved by Beth Kuzma. Is there a second? By Frank Brown. All those in favor, please raise your papers. All those opposed, the article is restricted. Now we'll move on to warrant Article 13. Article 13, shall the Amherst School District raise and appropriate $300,000 to be added to the Amherst School District Capital Facilities Repair, Maintenance, and Improvement Expendable Trust Fund for repairing, maintaining, and improving capital facilities previously established in March 2003. A majority vote is required. This is recommended by the Amherst School Board 5-0 and recommended by the Amherst School District Ways and Means Committee 6-0. The estimated tax impact of passing this article is 17 cents per thousand. So Beth, would you like to present on this?
Yep. Now I get the fun stuff. Okay. It's no secret that we have aging buildings in our district. The original structure at Clark is over 80 years old, with numerous additions being made throughout the 50s, 60s, and 70s. Wilkins was built in 1967, making it over 50 years old, and AMS was originally built in 1974, making it over 45 years old. With aging buildings comes aging systems. We're quickly approaching the point where it will be time to replace and repair some of these extremely expensive items in our buildings. In order to help budget, plan, and stabilize the impact for taxpayers, we're planning to start adding significant funds to a capital reserve fund each year to save for these repairs. A few years ago, we had a capital needs assessment done on all buildings in Amherst. This assessment looked at every single part of our buildings that would need to be replaced or repaired in the next 20 years and identified when they would most likely need to be replaced or repaired, and an estimate of roughly how much it would cost at that time while taking inflation into account. To be clear, these items are things such as boilers, roofs, siding, etc., not desks or furniture. As you can see, we have cracks in pavement, clogged and damaged catch basins, flat roofs with poor drainage, and standing water at AMS. Broken siding and rotted boards at Clark. And at Wilkins, we also have rotten wood, cracked pavement, but also rusted doors, fences that are only half as high as they should be due to erosion, and retaining walls that are failing also because of erosion. And these are just the pictures of obvious issues. This doesn't show the aging roofs and boilers, heating systems in classrooms that don't work, keeping classrooms at over 80 degrees in the winter or freezing cold, and are extremely expensive to run. In this presentation, we're going to be focusing more deeply on the first 5 years of the plan, but I wanted to take a moment to show you the detailed numbers for the full 20 years. It is here on the screen, but you also have it in your handout. You can see that we have details on how much money needs to be spent in each in each building every year. Looking at these numbers a little differently, so that it's easier to see, the capital needs assessment only took the facilities themselves into consideration, not the stability for taxpayers. With amounts fluctuating between $10,000 to over $2 million in any given year, to stabilize the impact to taxpayers, our plan is to add money to a reserve fund every year so that we can build up enough money over the years to cover the costs as they come due, rather than hitting taxpayers hard some years and not others. This plan mirrors what homeowners typically do on their homes. If they know that they have a roof that needs to be replaced in a few years, they set aside a few dollars every month so that they have enough money when the time comes. As you can see, there are no repairs slated in year one, but this chart also shows that in year 4, we have over $2 million in projects, and in year 6, we have almost another $2 million. And we currently only have $21,000 in our current capital needs fund. We also run the risk of some of these items failing earlier than planned, which is why we are asking for an initial investment of $300,000 this year. If we waited to start saving until next year, then we would need to be asking for larger amounts of money each year to make sure we have enough planned for especially years 4 and 6. Looking at the needs of our buildings and in a more detailed view, you can see these costs include over the next 5 years, repairs at Clark and Wilkins. The repairs at Clark and Wilkins in the near term are minimal. At AMS, however, you can see a very detailed list of everything that needs to be repaired or will hit end of life, with most of them coming up in year 4. Please keep in mind that although the plan says, for example, that the boiler controls and pumps at AMS will need to be replaced in FY24, we will assess the state of them at that time and see if they really need to be replaced or if they can wait another year or 2. There's flexibility in the schedule that we've set to allow for equipment to last longer than their typical life, but also for others to fail earlier than expected. Creating a reserve fund allows for this flexibility. I also want to point out that we will not be throwing good money after bad. Over the next year or so, we'll be putting minimal money into repairs while we wait for the results of the study for renovation and replacement Tom mentioned earlier. Depending on the outcome of that study, the amount raised for the capital needs fund will be adjusted. However, even while we wait for this study to be completed, we know that at least one of these buildings will be around for many years and that we will need to keep up to date with these repairs so that the buildings do not fall into disrepair. Here's our funding plan for the next 5 years. If this warrant article passes, it will have a 17-cent impact on taxes, which is about $60 per year for the average home.
Okay. Frank, would you like to give the Ways and Means report on this warrant article?
Ways and Means reviewed this very carefully and felt that it was prudent to start to set aside funds for the repairs. First of all, while there is a very detailed schedule for what should be done, there's no guarantee that things are going to last until that happens, or you can postpone it, but you also, as we've seen at Clark with the septic system and at the middle school with the lead in the water, which was not fully addressed, but enough to sort of make it safe, that there are going to be repairs given the age of these buildings. And we will start to need to plan for those and not see $1.5 million bills in a year. So the Ways and Means voted 6-0 in support of this and starting to set aside those funds.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Before I throw it open to the floor, has Steve Coughlin made it back alive yet? Doesn't look like it. He found the cookies. Okay. So I'd like to open it to the floor. Does anyone want to comment, ask questions on this warrant article? Sir.
Hi, I'm Martin Rowley at 8 Old Mount Vernon Road. Just a question on the bottom line on each fiscal year, the assessment. Is that the increase or the assessment each year that you'll be asking for?
Sorry, you mean on your handout?
Yeah, the handout, fiscal year 21. I assume that's the $300,000 that you mentioned.
I don't actually have the packet. So I believe, because I don't have it in front of me, thank you. No. So are you talking on this? Just so I know what I'm talking about. Or the voter's guide that was handed out. Here. I appreciate that.
Can you just describe that to everyone, please? I beg your pardon?
So yes, that, that very bottom line is what we project putting into a warrant article every single year. Michelle, did that get edited? To match the line graph?
Yeah, the bottom line,
Talk louder, please.
sorry, is that better?
Yes.
The bottom line shows the amount for each year that would be requested in a warrant article. And that also shows in the chart right below there what the cost of the projects would be. So if the total cost of the project was moved each year, you can see how that spikes and dips from year to year. But if you go based on funding a reserve fund, it's flattened out that impact from year to year. And that would be the line that goes across the bar graph.
I understand, thank you. So that if 300,000 is a $60 increase on average house, would the, say it's 600,000, would that be a $120 increase, and each year it'll increase by that much as we go across this bottom line?
No, so it won't be that much added every single, so it's not like this year we're asking for, I'm just making sure I'm understanding your question. It's not, this year we're asking for 300,000. Next year we're going to be asking for about 500,000. So it will, I can't do the
It'll be
math
the
quickly in
difference
my head.
between the $60 and the whatever.
A
it'll be
little,
for 5
yeah.
years.
Not quite 120, and then the next year it'll be 650. So it will go up, but it will be, if you want to take it, if you want to look at it this way, we're asking for $300,000 this year, so next year it'll be a $200,000 difference than what we're asking for
I
this
see.
year.
Okay.
So it kind of, it's not that 120 on top of what you're paying this year. So there is a difference between the two.
Adam, go ahead.
Oh, Tom,
Thank you. So I'll make this pretty simple. So between Amherst and Sohegan, we're asking for about 650 grand a year, each year, every year for the next 20 or so years. So your taxes will go up once, but then remain consistent for the next 20 years as it relates to capital maintenance.
So the increase will go up once, but that sum will, you say, will be consistent for the next 20 years?
That is the plan,
Each year.
yes.
Okay, thank you.
That's a really good
Bob?
Bob Grumbeck, 6 Fair.
Okay,
Bob Grumbeck, 6 Fair Oaks Drive. Just making sure I understand it. Your intention is after 5 years to have an extra 500,000 or so sitting in the fund? Because your total ask is 2.73 and your total spend is 227.
So as the plan goes forward, in any given year, we're hoping we don't hit zero in the fund because we have more we have more funding and more things that are coming up in the following years. So if you look, this is for the first 5 years, but if you look at the graph, we're going to need another almost $1 million worth, almost $2 million worth of projects that are coming in year 6.
So the answer is just yes.
Pretty much, yes.
$500,000
We don't want to
stays
bring
in
it
there
to
for more
zero
things.
because this needs to be a fund that.
Very good. Thank you.
In the way, Bob, just to follow up on that, the way that it's laid out in here is it's really hard to get 20 years worth of data in one sheet without making it too small to read, essentially. So we focused on those 5 years, but this is that ongoing continual project so that, yes, we may have 400,000, whatever the difference is, left over as we go into year 6, but when we add another 500,000 or 600,000 in year 6, it'll go back up to $1 million to take care of the $2 million that we have in year 7. So that's the whole principle of doing that. So we just focus on the 5-year glance because it's the immediate future. Things could always change. A new school or a renovation gets built and it changes the need for that money. But essentially, yes, that is the short answer is yes to your question, but that's the reasoning why it's only 5 years in the packet.
May I follow up on that exact line?
Okay, go ahead.
I would just say that money, when it's raised, I would encourage the board to spend it if you have appropriate projects to do it. Because obviously when it's sitting in the town capital reserves, it is cash. It makes virtually nothing.
Correct, and as we go through the 20 years, that money there are plans to spend it. It will not just sit there and rot away, and it's not just going to sit there.
We don't let it rot away, but.
Correct, but it's not going to sit there and go to waste, I should say. It's not going to be ignored. I mean, and we're going to try to avoid having only 22,000 in there, so.
Thank you.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Tom. Sir?
Bruce Barter, Buckridge Drive. It looks to me like we don't get any significant need to spend, and you mentioned this, until 24. But we're going to be earning or taxing to get 300 this year and 600 next year, et cetera. What is done with that money until it is needed? Do we invest it, is what I'm getting at? Because we're talking, I know interest rates are not that large, but we are talking some money here.
Yeah. Adam?
Yeah, it'll be put in a capital reserve fund held by the trustees of the trust funds for the town of Amherst. So it can't be spent for any other purpose except for these purposes. And it will gain a minimum amount of interest because it's, as Mr. Grunbeck mentioned, it's cash. So it's 1.05, no, 0.15. 1.5. Yeah. Sounds like, okay.
And Mr. Grunbeck, you're a trustee, right? 1.5. Yeah. Mr. Grunbeck is a trustee of the trust fund. So. Are there any other questions, concerns? Ms. McCabe?
This is related to the one from the last. The board's is going to have to modify the tuition agreement with Mount Vernon that expires on June 30th, 2021. And there are a lot of capital projects, hence the reason for this warrant article. The current agreement excludes capital costs and only charges a nominal amount to Mount Vernon for long-term debt obligations based on a 50-year amortization schedule. They're not helping to pay for the building, and the tuition that we're getting for them, they're using the buildings. So I'm asking the board, because the renewal is coming up next year, that you're cognizant of that, and that when that agreement comes up for renewal, that you look at including some of the capital costs.
Thank you. Any comments? Okay. Any other comments or questions? Okay, seeing none, I will instruct the clerk to place the warrant article on the ballot as currently worded and thus declared. Is there a motion to restrict reconsideration of this warrant article? I see one from Mr. Brown. Is there a second? Somebody else. I see one from Mr. Glover. All those in favor, please raise your, thank you. All those opposed, the motion, or the article is restricted. So I would like to invite any additional motions from the floor, that is to say, to adjourn.
Courtesy.
Or
I have like 3 more slides.
you do?
Yeah.
Okay. So, then please give their 3 slides and then we'll move on.
Unless nobody wants to see them. It's just really quick. Adam, you can do that. It's just a really quick update, or a really quick refresher for the appropriations comparisons this current year to what we're proposing. We are not asking for another $50,000 to be added as a special warrant article, so that amount is reduced. We are asking for the extra $300,000. The total difference from our current budget to the next, including the $300,000, is $666,448. Happens when it's all printed on 2 sides. And then this slide just really quickly summarizes the MS-26 in a really nice chart. This is in your packet, so that you can see we actually have about a little over 25% of our revenue comes from other sources other than taxes. So I just wanted to highlight that, including 8.3% comes from the statewide education property tax, and 9.1% in state adequacy, as a state adequacy grant. And then if both warrant articles pass, we are looking at an increase of 26 cents to the tax rate, or $92 for the average household.
All right. Now I will entertain a motion to adjourn. So moved by Mr. Brown. Is there a second? Yep. All those in favor? We're adjourned. Thank you very much. Good night.